While the world is focused on the Ukraine war, there is another theater which is quietly heating up.
По укреплению статуса России как великой арктической державы.
Moscow's military reach continues to expand, building new bases in the Arctic Circle.
We are talking about the Arctic, where Russia is making deep forays.
The Russian military is sending a clear message to the outside world that Russia is ready and determined to protect its national interests in the Arctic. The Arctic waters are thought to contain 1/4 of the planet's undiscovered oil and gas. With polar ice shrinking, there's now an opportunity to extract the energy. There are new shipping lanes too.
For years, the Russian president has had a grand plan to become the biggest beneficiary of climate change in the region.
It's the only country with a fleet of nuclear icebreakers to open up and control Arctic trade routes that could make trade between Asia and the West much faster and cheaper.
Hi everybody! Ever since the Russia-Ukraine war has started, we saw how the world has thrashed Russia. A total of 11,300 sanctions have been imposed, $300 billion of Russian foreign reserves have been frozen, and more than 1,000 companies, ranging from British Petroleum to McDonald's, all of them, they have exited the Russian markets. As a result, the Russian economic output has already contracted by 2.1%.
Sanctions against Russia over its war in Ukraine are intensifying. Most Russian banks have been blocked from the SWIFT global payment system. Also, many major brands have pulled out of Russia.
Russian domestic production has come to a complete standstill.
Now, Russia's economy took a hit from sweeping Western sanctions.
Moscow is warning that inflation could hit 23% this year, and the economy is expected to sink into recession as well.
The economy in Russia is in free fall. Inflation is spiking. His war chest of foreign reserves is now worthless. The ruble is worth less than a penny.
So now that winter is almost over in Europe, Russia knows that its leverage of gas is going to be far limited. And more importantly, even if the war ends with Russia winning it, these sanctions are expected to stay on Russia for the rest of the decade. So even after war, the economists expect the Russian economy to keep on sinking. So you know what, guys? Russia is doing something absolutely crazy in the Arctic Ocean. And while most people think of Arctic Ocean to be yet another icy region with absolutely no use at all, Russia is using the same Arctic Ocean to build a golden trade route that could shift the world power itself. And this route is so crazy that while it takes 13,000 miles with the Suez Canal route to go from Europe to Asia, if the Arctic route is used, the same Europe to Asia journey will take only 8,000 miles. And more importantly, it will save almost 2 weeks in just travel time. And the best part for Russia is that in this entire route, it's almost impossible for US to exert its influence. And Putin is so bullish on this strategy that Russia has already invested $29 billion to develop this shipping route. On top of that, massive port construction projects have been taken up, railways are being expanded, and most importantly, Russia is even modernizing its army in this region. And this is yet another long-term war plan of Russia against the West. So in this episode today, let's try to understand what is so special about this Russian golden trade route. If successful, how will this trade route shift the dynamics of power from US to Russia? And finally, what are the study materials to help you understand this critical geopolitical event better? But before we move on, let me thank our partners of this episode, and that is Growth School. Growth School is a platform whereby you can learn from the top 1% of the industry professionals. Growth School was also named as LinkedIn's top startup this year. In Growth School, you can learn data engineering from Sanket, Anjali and Atul, who worked in Microsoft, Google and Nvidia. In Growth School, you can learn management consulting from Riya Chabra, who works at Meta in London. You can learn project management from Sarosh, who's a product manager at Google. And you can also learn growth hacking directly from Weber, who's the founder of Growth School and also has a significant experience in scaling companies like Uber and Klook. And if you want to learn something else, you can even check out Growth School's other programs and courses that will help you excel in this hyper-competitive world. The best part of Growth School is the result that their students have achieved. People who have completed their programs have got jobs and internships from companies like MPL, Paytm, Microsoft, Swiggy, PhonePe and many more. Growth School has taught more than 3.5 lakh learners, which has led to countless great stories of people getting jobs, people getting massive hikes, starting freelancing and so on and so forth. So if this sounds useful to you and if you want to equip yourself with extraordinary skills in this hyper competitive market, check out these programs and other low cost workshops that Growth School has to offer. And the first 100 people that use my special link in the description will get a discount of 5,000 rupees. To understand the rising power of Russia, we first need to understand the heart of global economy, which are the shipping routes. Now, if you look at this map, you will see that Russia stands right in the middle of two continents of Europe and Asia. And currently, the primary trade route being used to take goods from Europe to Asia is this route called the Suez trade route. And this route has become so popular that about 12% of global trade and 30% of all global container traffic passes through the Suez Canal only. And here's how a ship will travel via this route. If a ship is filled with manufactured goods from China and is traveling to England, it would first go down to Singapore through the Strait of Malacca. Then it would sail through the Indian Ocean, go through Bab el-Mandeb, pass through the Suez Canal, and then finally it will pass below Europe through the Strait of Gibraltar to reach England. This route from Europe to Asia is a distance of about 21,000 kilometers or 13,000 miles via the Suez Canal. The second route that we have is via the Cape route. Here the ship goes from China via the Strait of Malacca, and instead of passing through the Suez Canal, it goes down below the Cape of Good Hope, goes around Africa all the way, and then goes to Britain. This obviously is a much longer route whereby the ship needs to travel 5,500 miles longer, and it might take another 2 weeks extra to reach Europe as compared to the Suez route. And then there's the shortest route of all, and this is through the Northern Sea route. This is a route that starts from China, passes through both the Koreas, then goes above Russia's entire landmass, passes through the Arctic Ocean, then it crosses Norway, Sweden and Finland before reaching England. This route is just 8,000 miles long and it's 5,000 miles lesser than the Swiss route and 10,500 miles lesser than the Cape route. But you know what, guys? In spite of this route being the shortest route of all, if you look at the volume of shipping as compared to the other two routes, it's very, very negligible. Now the question over here is, if China and Russia are the biggest trading partners with Europe and US, why wasn't the China-Europe and Russia-Europe trade being done through this particular route? Well, the answer is very, very simple. This region has a ton of ice. If you look at the map, this is the Arctic Ocean and most of this region is filled with ice. And as you go towards the North Pole, the thickness of the ice also keeps on increasing. And we all know what happens when a ship crashes onto an iceberg, right?
A Canadian cruise ship has sunk off Antarctica after hitting an iceberg.
The vessel finally sank about 20 hours after the collision.
This is the reason why normal ships cannot go through these routes and you need special ice-breaking ships just to clear out the ice so that you could actually go on to travel. And this brings three critical problems to the table. Number one, ice breaking is both expensive and time consuming. Number two, when you don't know how much ice you're going to break through, you cannot predict the estimated times of arrivals. And lastly, if an oil spill happens in these icy regions of Arctic, or if a ship gets stuck in the Arctic, it's both an environmental and an economic disaster. But guess what? This is where there's a bittersweet news for the world. Sweet because it's going to provide an alternate and cheaper shipping route, and bitter because it's going to promote global warming.
The Arctic was warming 2 times faster, and this new study says it is 4 times faster. Either way, it's not good news.
One of the major causes was global warming.
There is no denying the planet is getting warmer.
The ice in the Arctic is melting rapidly. For the rest of the world, this is a climate crisis, but for Putin, it's an opportunity.
Russia has been developing its military infrastructure in the Arctic and along the coast of the Arctic Ocean.
Moscow is hoping these icebreakers will help it make use of the route, as it is likely to become more accessible all year round due to climate change.
If you look at this graph shows the temperature anomaly or long-term average temperature difference in the Arctic Ocean. And in this graph, you will see that until the 1980s, the average temperature difference did not cross 0 degrees at all. But after the 1980s, as industrialization accelerated, the long-term temperature difference has shot slowly and steadily to touch plus 3 degrees. In fact, the entire Arctic is heating up so fast that while the planet as a whole has warmed up by 0.19 degrees Celsius per decade, the Arctic has warmed up 3.8 times faster at 0.73 degrees Celsius per decade. And this is because of something called the loss of reflective snow. In simple words, snow reflects more of sun's energy because it is white and is more reflective than the darker ground surface beneath or the ocean. But when the snow starts melting, the solar energy gets absorbed in the ground and in the ocean, and this causes more warming of the earth, causing more snow and ice to melt, and this again causes more loss of reflective snow, which causes more solar energy to be absorbed, which then increases the temperature further. So if you see, this is a vicious cycle of global warming. These are some of the many reasons why the Arctic ice is melting. If this is very clear to you, let's look at the second set of the maps. These maps below show warming per decade on the left and Arctic amplification, or how fast the Arctic warms up, on the right. So if this region of the map has a color index 2, it means that this region is warming up twice as fast as the world. If it has an index color of 7, it means that the region is warming up 7 times faster as compared to the world. In this case, for example, the warming is 7 times faster in the Bering Sea as compared to the world. Now, if you look at the map very carefully, you will see that the regions that are indexed 5, 6 and 7 are particularly closer to the Russian landmass rather than the European landmass. So if this melting trend continues till 2030 or 2040, the Russian landmass will be practically free of ice in the summers. Now, while on one side people might think this is an environmental nightmare, there is an argument that this melting of ice could prove to be an economic miracle for Russia. So the question is, how will this ice melting change the trade game for Russia, and how will Russia benefit from global warming? Well, the answer to this again lies in the shipping lanes. The first advantage that Russia will have is the cost of shipping. If you remember, like I said, while it takes 13,000 miles to travel via the Swiss trade route, it takes only 8,000 miles to travel via the Northern Sea route. So let's see how much money a ship operator would save by changing his route from Swiss to Northern Sea route. Let's say a toy-loaded ship is going from China to Britain. Considering a speed of 20 miles an hour, the ship would be traveling for 20 into 24, which is 480 miles per day. Considering it would take 27 days to traverse through 13,000 miles of the Suez Canal route, for Northern Sea route it would take 16.66 days for 8,000 miles. If the cost of chartering a ship comes to $160,000 per day, for 27 days in the Suez Canal route it would cost $4.32 million. But for 16.6 days in the Northern Sea route, it would cost only $2.656 million. So the difference in one-way cost from China to Britain would come up to $1.664 million. Assuming just 10 trips a year, it would easily save $16 million per ship per year. This is the first reason why traders would love to use the Northern Sea route. The second reason has to do with the over-dependence of world trade on Suez Canal. Now, if you look at the Suez route, there are 4 major choke points. Strait of Malacca, that is between Singapore and Malaysia. Bab el-Mandeb, that is located between Yemen and Djibouti. The Suez Canal itself, that runs through Egypt. And the Strait of Gibraltar, that is located between Spain and Morocco. Now, as the names suggest, they are choke points. So, if due to intentional or unintentional reasons, if these choke points are closed, then the entire shipping route can be blocked. And this would have 3 major risks. Number 1, in case of a US-China conflict, the US can intentionally choke the Strait of Malacca, which will slow down 50% of the Chinese trade. Secondly, in case of any accident, if one of these points get choked, it could cost the world billions of dollars. And a classic example of the same is what we saw with the Suez Canal choke in March 2021. And this is what it looked like.
Huge container ship blocking Egypt's Suez Canal. But experts are warning that it could take weeks. More than 150 ships are waiting to get into what is one of the world's most important shipping routes.
One of the world's most important shipping routes is jammed. The largest container ships in the world is now blocking it. According to a report, they're losing $400 million per hour. Every hour, $400 million.
Oil prices, they're on the rise. How come? Well, if you're waiting for a load of oil or gas and it's not there, you got to buy it from somewhere.
And lastly, while traveling through the Bab el-Mandeb choke point, the ship operators were facing piracy issues near the Somalian coast. So if every ship passing through the Bab el-Mandeb has to protect itself from threats such as piracy, terrorist attack or spillovers, they need an alternate route or they need more security. This is a reason why traders would again love to shift to the northern sea route. If this is very clear to you, let's look at how this mega trend could turn Russia into a superpower again. And this again has three simple reasons. Firstly, it gives Russia the unfair advantage of taxes that it can actually collect to allow ships to pass through this region. Because if you look at the northern sea route, it passes through Moscow's exclusive economic zone. So companies seeking to actually use it are billed by the Russian government itself. And by 2030, Russia is eyeing to see shipment of 80 million tons of goods. Secondly, as this ice keeps on melting, it's going to uncover a massive treasure of natural resources for Russia. According to the US Geological Survey assessment of 2008, 30% of the world's undiscovered gas and 13% of the undiscovered oil reserves actually lie close to the North Pole, and Russia has very easy access to it. This is equal to about 90 billion barrels of oil, which is 16 times the reserves of Norway and 3 times the reserves of US. Also, an estimated 1669 trillion cubic feet of gas is present, which is again 99% of Russia's current reserves and 2354% of Norway's current reserves and 500% of United States current reserves. And not just that, the Arctic is also extremely rich in terms of minerals and rare earth metals. So by UN laws, every country has exclusive rights to all the natural resources under the sea up to 200 nautical miles from their coast. So Russia has a lot of minerals under this belt. So if Russia develops this sea route, this route will become an energy superhighway for the export of hydrocarbons and other natural resources of the Russian Arctic region. As a result, it will become the best alternate to Suez Canal for world trade. And lastly, it will be the smoothest line of shipping with no choke points or pirates. This is the reason why Russia has allocated $29 billion just to develop the shipping route by 2035. Massive port construction projects are being taken up, railway lines are being expanded, and most importantly, this is also the reason why Russia is modernizing its army in this region. Now the question arises, is the West just waiting for Russia to rise again? If it is so evident, then what is the West doing to counter Russia? Well, unfortunately, although the West is trying to build up its defenses, they are nowhere close to Russia, who have already been building up their military in this region since the Cold War itself. And if you look at the map, you will see that there is a stark difference between both Russian military bases and the bases of the West. And the best part is that the Russian bases are both more strategically located and more in quantity to deter the West from hindrance. This is a story of how Russia is building an alternate trade route to rebuild itself from the shatters of the Ukraine war. Now, what remains to be seen is how will this play out in the next 2 decades, and how will the world react to Russia taking advantage of a catastrophe like global warming. And this brings us to the last part of the episode, and that are the study materials to help you understand this Russian operation better. The first thing I'm attaching are the materials on choke points of the world to help you understand the bottlenecks of world trade. Read through this and you will understand how critical world trade is and how critical these junctures are. Secondly, I'm attaching all the Arctic-related developments made by Russia. And thirdly, I am attaching a thinkschool video to help you understand the Belt and Road Initiative of China and how the US became a superpower, to help you get a background of how these world powers operate and how they have strategically located their bases. That's all from my side for today, guys. If you learned something valuable, please make sure to hit the like button in order to make YouTube Baba happy. And for more such insightful business and political case studies, please subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye. And don't forget to check out Growth School from the link in the description if you want to learn, upskill and 10x your career growth.